This is Doug Munro, Talent Acquisition Director at Aerospace, and I'm next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
This is RecTech, the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. The world of digital recruiting is evolving rapidly, and our mission is to teach you about the new tools and techniques for finding talent. Today's show is a recruiter edition. The RecTech podcast is sponsored by our friends over at HireTool, the recruiter's best friend. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what real recruiters say about the product on social media. Emily Duran writes, I get amazing results with the latest version of HireTool. The AI search is the best tool out there. It's also easy to get more info, sort, and contact. And Rajiv Ryan says the AI sourcing in the latest version is just awesome. It's user-friendly, adds new profiles to projects, certainly useful for sourcing software talent in the U.S. And you can find them on the web at hiretool.com, HireTual.com. All right, let's bring in our guest. Doug Munro has more than 15 years' experience recruiting top-flight talent, including key personnel for mission-critical work in the national defense arena. He's filled positions in a wide variety of areas, including executive leadership, cybersecurity, IT, program project management, contract administration, and intelligence analysts. He's also well-versed in the security clearance arena and has been involved in a broad spectrum of federal procurements. We know each other online, but today's the first time we've talked. Hey, Doug, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Chris.
Nice. We missed each other at Recruit DC this year, but now we got a chance to talk one-on-one, so looking forward to the conversation today. I guess first question, just what's new and exciting in your recruiting world these days? What are you working on? What's hot for you guys?
Well, I recently joined Aerospace. We're an aviation firm. We do branch into some other intelligence analysis. Virtually all of the work we do is for the Department of Defense, although we do support law enforcement agencies as well, a few commercial entities, but by and large, we're a DoD-centric company. And it's been a really exciting change after so many years in the federal space. This is my first foray into aviation, and more specifically what we do is ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So it's recruiting pilots and mechanics, UAV operators, backseaters, and it's always fun after doing this a while to pick up some new tricks and dive into a new arena. So
those positions are now outsourced in some respect. They're not actual, Air Force positions. They're private contractors that are out there doing some of this stuff.
Correct. We are a contractor. I guess you would
Gotcha.
Call us. And we support these efforts that are bid out, procured by the Department of Defense.
Interesting. It's funny. Every time I go to down to DC, I meet so many government contracting staffing firms. You guys literally own that space down there. It's hard to find like an actual corporate recruiter or something like that down there. It's just amazing how big that sector is down in the DC area.
Indeed, it's fascinating, and I think it's one of the you referenced that we sort of ships passing in the night at Recruit DC. It's a wonderful event, and I think one of the things that's made it so successful is that the DC area is so unique in terms of the recruiting that goes on. Even folks who are in corporate entities, invariably there is some connection to some kind of government work.
Yeah,
and it's its own little animal. So I think
yeah, being that it is so competitive, though, Doug, how do you guys? You guys are kind of, I think, competing for a small pool of talent, right? These top secret clearances, people don't grow on trees, right? So you're really in there. There's a lot of competition out there. In terms of other recruiters looking for this talent. So how do you deal with that? What's that like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, to throw another challenge into the mix, and this is not as prevalent for us. We don't we're not involved in too many IT contracts, but in the IT contract realm in this area. The government has increasingly gone to what they call LPTA contracts, lowest price, technically acceptable. So what it basically means is you meet a very minimal bar as far as your competence, and then whoever's got the lowest price is going to win. And, of course, that impacts the salaries we can pay folks. And in a competitive market, that can be incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
So that in those instances, you just sort of manipulate the overall contract, try to pay for the folks you really need, and squeeze some less experienced folks maybe in at other levels within the contract to balance it out and still maintain some level of profitability. But then when it comes to the specific work that I'm doing with MAG, it is indeed a limited talent pool. Most of our operators are top secret or top secret with SCI access, which of course narrows the pool. They have to have minimal numbers of hours and particular aircraft. They have to have very specific certifications. And so we do a great deal in terms of internal referrals, because also a great deal of the work that we do is OCONUS. We have more people working in Afghanistan than we have in the United States for our company.
Okay.
And so those folks get to know folks on other contracts with other companies, and we run a lean and mean enough shop that we're able to put more money into compensating those folks. And so it becomes a competitive advantage for us, and we treat them well. We take care of the families when they're deployed, and so that becomes a differentiator for us as well. But all of that said, it is very competitive, and in fact, that's why we have at any given time probably 70 to 75 open requirements on our website, and that speaks to them. A good half of them are probably just evergreen recs, and because we need to almost overstaff for pilots because there is going to be attrition. We're going to lose folks to the airlines when they go into a hiring surge, and they can outbid us. And quite frankly, it's difficult work. For the most part, our pilots, for example, do what they call 60-60s. They rotate in for 60 days, then they rotate back out for 60 days. But it's tough on families, and I would say our average tenure on those contracts overseas is probably, certainly less than 2 years. If we get a year out of somebody, that's a win, because it's tough.
Yeah.
It's like active duty all over again for these guys.
No, it's definitely it sounds really challenging, but at the same time, it's also you're helping keep people safe, so that's a kind of a cool thing. So, how big is your recruiting team there, Doug?
7, soon to be 8, and that's geographically dispersed. We have business units in Huntsville, Alabama, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Titusville, Florida, as well as obviously our corporate offices here in Virginia. Yeah.
You mentioned referrals as a big source of hiring. Is that your primary source of candidates, would you say?
Depending on position, for a lot of the pilots and mechanics, it would probably be in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% of our hires, just because of the way these contracts operate. And not to mention, aside from all of the strict qualifications that they have to meet, there's also the soft set that you don't have in your typical corporate environments, where you got to know somebody because you're going to be sitting next to them on a bunk for 2 months.
Yeah.
So it's very important that the sociability is there as well. So I would say it's probably at 50-60% overseas. Domestically, it's far lower, probably down in the 15% range.
Gotcha. Do you? What other sources of hiring come next? I mean, how much are you using things like job boards, advertising, and then how much sourcing are you doing?
Not a great deal of advertising yet. I'm actually in the process of working on our profiles, trying to get a better marketing brand out there for us. Mm-hmm. But primarily, we're very effective with LinkedIn, as much as it can be a pain in the neck, as we all know in recruiting. A lot of our folks are on LinkedIn, and they are more responsive than software engineers, to use one example. So we've had great success. And the team, it's another somewhat unique characteristic here. Most of my recruiters are former operators. I've got a licensed pilot is one of them. We've got a couple of guys who were boots on the ground, but interacting with all those ISR services. So they have a unique capability to connect with the candidate pool, mm-hmm. and they have a credibility as soon as they do connect, because they've waded through the same sand, so to speak. But so LinkedIn is very effective for us. We do use clearance jobs as well, since obviously virtually everyone requires a clearance. We also use JS Firm. It's an aviation job board. very effective, very inexpensive relative to other job boards, and it's a go-to. People in aviation are familiar enough with it that you get a great deal of flow there. And those would be the primary sources as far as what we're going out day to day looking.
You probably don't have to sell the jobs too hard in terms of cybersecurity. I mean, they kind of sell themselves a little bit in terms of convincing that candidate to take the job. I mean, they know what they're getting into already, right? They know why they're in the industry already, I think, right?
I would say that's true, but there are enough differences between companies that company reputation, for example, is huge, and it's actually one of the challenges we're continuing to try to overcome. Is that while we are very successful in our world, we are still, our competition is L3, Northrop Grumman, huge systems integrators, huge defense contractors. And so there are a lot of folks who just don't know who we are. So we're working hard to try and make sure we're getting the word out, but also as those differentiators. If we can pay a little better, if we have a little more personal touch in terms of how we support both the employee and the family that's back home while they're deployed, there's still a sales job to a degree, but you're right, at least in terms of the mission. And that's frankly one of the most exciting things about being here and being in this space. Everyone in D.C. says the work they do is mission critical, and at some level, you could make that argument. But when you're talking about the work that we do in ISR, we literally save lives, and it's exciting. And to the candidate, they know that. They know the kind of work that we're doing because they've been doing it themselves, and I think it appeals to them. Yeah.
By the way, have you ever gone overseas to like Afghanistan or anything? Or?
It's in the works. It's a possibility, but we haven't locked it down yet. The interesting thing too is that even when you think about Afghanistan, we have an office in Kabul, but all of the work that we do is at outlying bases. So it's a pretty unique environment. But I would love to. I think it'd be just one of those life experiences to see how these operations work in person.
Definitely. What's your ATS there, Doug? What do you guys use?
My old friend, I walked into a situation where we were using Deltek Talent, the former HR Smart. We also just recently made an acquisition that included BambooHR, which actually smaller firms I found to be a pretty effective tool. Deltek Talent I cannot speak so highly of, and we are moving to Ultipro. That was a decision, again, was made prior to my joining. So I'm just going to see what we can do to make the best of it. Yeah.
What do you don't like about it, and what do you do like about it? If there's anything, I mean, give me one feature or something like that kind of drives you crazy.
Well, to be honest with you, in talent, and this is oversimplifying to make it into one thing, but just trying to figure out how to get to something. I had to edit some documents that we use in our onboarding bundles, and you could not just go to that document and edit it. You had to do a search through, I believe they call it, what was it? It was some bizarre term that had nothing to do, it wasn't a library or something else. There was literally a back door that you had to find to get to the document. And then you couldn't just get to the document, you had to get to the words that you wanted to change, the passage in the document you wanted to modify. So you're searching that, you're pulling up a bunch of documents and then having to drill into each one to find where that section is. And that, I think, is exemplary of exactly the way talent works overall. Everything is hard to find. None of it makes any intuitive sense. The semantics of how they've designed it make no sense.
Well, I think there's, it's good to see that change is coming to the ATS industry. You've got these newer players now that are really focusing more on the user experience. And I really wish, I think there's a lot of ATSs out there, just kind of going off on a rant on my own here. And a lot of them are just more poorly designed from a user experience. And if you want to continue being in business, you gotta make things easier for the recruiters out there, because they're time pressed and they need stuff that saves them time, not makes it harder to or longer to do their jobs. So if you're an ATS listening to this, then
and I hope that your analysis is correct. That more and more the ATS builders are involving recruiters in the process, and I know that's true of many. Because it even using the example of iSIMS, I had a positive experience working with them in my previous company. But even at that, when it came to reporting, there was nothing remotely intuitive of how you designed the report.
Yeah. I was the iCIMS user at my last recruiting job, and I loved the front end of iCIMS in terms of the user experience that the candidate got, things like that. When it came to the report area, that drove me crazy because, they had some built-in reports in there, stuff like that were nice. But anything custom, it was like you had to have a science degree to figure it out. I mean, it was really hard. And the interface itself was just not very intuitive at all. So,
I had exactly the same experience, although I will say this on their behalf. One of the nice things was their customer service was outstanding, Houston. And it kind of surprised me because I'd be calling them at least once a week trying to develop a custom report and pulling my hair out. And I'm sure they were dreading the call, but they would sit through and they would walk me through and we would eventually get it done. But no one was ever able to explain to me how they came up with the business logic of how they designed.
Yeah, I took a lot of advantage of that help desk call-in number too, so that's good they had that. All right, how's your apply process on HR Smart?
It's okay. It's more daunting than it should be, and that's something we're going to fix in Ultipro. And part of it was just you can't blame the system. It was configured in an inefficient fashion by the folks who brought it in-house about less than 2 years ago. But so we're just going to need to do a better job designing Ultipro so that we can configuring it rather, so that we can make sure that candidate experience is quick and easy, no repetition of inputs, and mobile friendly as well, which our instance of talent really isn't.
Yeah, I clicked on apply to one of your jobs now, and I get the first time user or returning user, put in your email and password. To me, I always thought that should come toward the end of the process. We let them start filling in some information first about themselves, actually applying to the job. I think this the login screen turns a lot of candidates off overall, but story for another day.
I would agree. When I do track the data, we don't get a whole lot of folks that stop. We don't have too many incomplete applications, but one stellar candidate would be one incomplete app too much. So we definitely we need some work in that regard.
Yeah. I was on some website the other day. I forgot what it was, and I was registering for something, and they had like a chatbot registration thing. So it was kind of like a live on-screen thing where we're just typing the sentence. I would put in the answer. I'll pop the next sentence. It was kind of neat, and I thought that would make a great apply process if they could do it like that. Doug, any other software tools in your HR toolbox these days? You mentioned some job boards and stuff, but any other sourcing tools or video stuff, onboarding stuff, anything else?
I would another, on my laundry list of things to get to. Again, only been here about 3 months. Is we would like to do some video. We are in the process of mapping out. We're going to expand our careers page. Well, essentially, we're going to duplicate it. Since we do have these different areas that we support, we're going to create multiple career pages for pilots, for mechanics, for corporate positions, so that we can get better content into those. And we're going to be creating video for that. We're actually in the process of creating video for July 25th is Veteran Hiring Day, so we're creating some video to go with a push for that. Absolutely. I'd like to eventually look into the possibility, since many of our jobs are related, attaching some video as well to particular job families, again, like pilots, showing what we're able to, what isn't classified, what we're able to share, just showing our folks in action, because I got to tell you, it's pretty exciting stuff when you see these aircraft up doing what they do and see all the bells and whistles that are on the aircraft and
your jobs have a very visual aspect to them, so I think the more you can show that off to candidates, that's going to help, increase your applicant pool, I think, overall. So definitely get on that. That's awesome. If you need to check out SkillScout, they do. They'll come to your location, shoot them. I just had a client of mine come to Connecticut here, and they did a bunch of shoots at different offices around the state, and they do a pretty good job of kind of capturing that. What that's like, that experience for the candidates. So check them out.
I was very impressed. I met them at a couple of different events.
Oh, good.
HRTX, And they were great. Did a great presentation. And my understanding is they've also got sort of a do-it-yourself kit now, which is a little less cost prohibitive. So it's definitely on the short list of things to look at. We do have in-house videographer and a couple of media and marketing folks, but I think SkillScout, from what I saw, did some really exceptional work. So I'd definitely like to take advantage of them.
Awesome. Let's take a quick break, listeners, so I can tell you about my other sponsor today, which is Rejobify. Rejobify wants to change the way employers reject candidates. So instead of simply rejecting them outright, you just add a small amount of text to your rejection email template, inviting them to a landing page where they can sign up for a free jobs or text course by email and gain access to other resume tools and offers. It's pretty cool. So go to rejobify.com. That's rejobify.com. All right, Doug, tell me a sourcing story, one from your past where you got creative in finding a candidate out there that was difficult or challenging. What comes to mind for you?
Well, honestly, it was in the cybersecurity realm, whereas, and everyone can read, there is a dramatic talent shortage. And for the particular work that my firm did, there were just not enough qualified people to do the work. So I don't know if it qualifies as one of your super sleuth sourcing exercises, but just I went around, I talked to the folks in our company, in particular the folks that were former military, or in this case, we had a gentleman who was current National Guard and current Army Reserve. And I was able to get some names from him. Eventually, that led to a professor of military science at Virginia Tech who was very well connected to Fort Gordon, which is the cybersecurity hub for the Army, certainly on the East Coast, and was able to utilize that introduction and the fact that we were recruiting down at Virginia Tech for graduates anyway, to get involved with the folks directly on the base at Fort Gordon. And one of the things that the absolute pot of gold for any recruiter who recruits folks coming out of the military would be to get a list of who's actually transitioning out and at what base and at what time and what their skill set is. Yeah. Wasn't able to quite get that, but I was able to get connected to folks on base who were able to spread the word about the kind of work that we were doing. And the great thing about the transitioning military as well is they get, if they're coming off active duty, they get their first relocation is on the Department of Defense. So we were able to relocate people without any expense to our company, but we were able to get, it was a treasure trove, and it was the kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Once you make that connection, there's going to be new people transitioning out every few months, and so we were able to develop a steady stream coming out of Fort Gordon. But it started with an internal employee, led to Virginia Tech, and then ultimately got down to Fort Gordon.
Very cool. Does the government, the military, publish like a list like that of transitioning people out in terms of what their skills are? Is there like a central database for that or something?
No, they don't, unfortunately. Yeah. There are ways around it. I mean, there's certainly, it's public information as far as which bases are typically utilized as transition bases, and it's not too hard to figure out what sort of people are going to be transitioning through in terms of their military occupation. But you don't get the precise list, the names. Those are, I believe they qualify under PII, so we don't have access to that. So and frankly, the transition offices, the TAP offices at military bases, they're typically, it's a rotation. It's a rotational duty for some staff sergeant or perhaps even someone lower on the chain, and they're really, they'll teach folks how to put their resume together. They'll teach folks how to dress and how to act in interviews, but they're doing it, the people that are doing it have been in the military for 20 years, so they have no idea what it's like to interview in the commercial space. So it's, the TAP offices mean well, but they're not terribly effective. Yeah,
gotcha. This has been great talking to you, Doug. Just a couple more questions before we close up things. What do you look for in a recruiter when you're hiring them? What are kind of your top traits you seek out in potential recruiters out there?
To be honest, when I'm hiring, the two things that leap out, aside from obviously when I'm rarely in a position where we can take somebody from scratch and build them into a recruiter, so some level of experience, although it doesn't necessarily have to be 10 years. But the two main things are personality, to be frank. I want to like you in the first 60 seconds of you sitting down in the interview. I think that's important. Yeah. We're connecting with people online. We're connecting with people on the phone. We're meeting them. And if someone likes you, they're more liable to talk to you, and they're going to remember you. And I think it's one of those things that you can't really teach. You're just either an engaging, interesting, likable person, or you're not. And I think being those things makes you a better salesperson, which is ultimately what we are at our core. And then the other is intellectual curiosity. I think I don't deal nearly enough with recruiting tech for my own purposes. There's so much more that I'd like to be doing, and I learn something new every day, and I follow folks like you and Dean DaCosta and Glenn Caffey, always looking for those, is there another tool out there that might be of use to me or my team? But also just the intellectual curiosity about the work that we do. It's the process. What's everyone else doing? That is there something that we should be trying to emulate here? And frankly, the curiosity about the work that we do. I wouldn't expect somebody to necessarily walk in and know the difference between an MI-17 and an AH-64, but I would want them to be curious enough to go out and figure that out. And so I think if you've got that, if you've got the personality and the intellectual curiosity, the details you'll be able to learn and pick up. And when you combine all of that together, you're going to be effective in your dealings with hiring managers and candidates. And those are really the things that I'm looking for, more than telling me all the things you did at the last agency you worked and how many hires you had and what your rec load was. That's all interesting, but it's not the core of what's going to make you successful.
Yeah. Well, Doug Munro, appreciate you joining me today. Tell the listeners how to connect with you online.
I am, what?
Or are you on Twitter? What's your Twitter handle?
Recruit Cyber DC.
Recruit Cyber DC, all right. Awesome. We'll link to that in the show notes, and you can find Doug on LinkedIn as well. We'll link to that. Doug, appreciate your time today, and good stuff, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Chris. It was a pleasure.
All right, that will do for this edition of the RecTech podcast. Thanks again to our sponsors, HireTool and Rejobify. Subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, we're now on Spotify. You can check us out on there if you are a Spotify user. And if you are an iTunes subscriber, leave a review, and I'll thank you on air. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, always be recruiting.
Another episode of RecTech is in the books. Follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit RecTechMedia.com, where you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. RecTech Media helps both HR tech firms and employers to get more clients or candidates through our consulting practice and online tools. So be sure to check out our sites like recruiting headlines, job fairing, and more to stay up to date on what's happening in recruiting. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of RecTech, the Recruiting Technology Podcast.